Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
And this is season 3 of Wrestling at Random, which means it could be anything. We could review anything. We've put every show and every event into the randomizer. It just fires up and it kicks us out shows to watch. And we don't pick the shows, but we'll pick the order. So we won't overwhelm you with tons of weekly TV.
Yes, the idea basically is that with the randomizer, just the sheer volume of TV shows versus major events, pay-per-views, Clash of the Champions, Saturday night's main event, there are thousands more episodes of TV than there are major shows. So the concept, as we explained before, for the season is that 1 week will be a pay-per-view or main event randomly chosen, and then the next week will be a TV show, and then back and forth if you're listening in linear fashion or if you're going through and picking and choosing. And so this week's show, this is a TV show week, and the randomizer did a very good job in that it is a weekly TV show that was not featured at all in season 2 of the podcast, which, as you know, most likely was all about weekly TV shows. So good job, randomizer.
Yeah, this one, when we first pulled it, I said, this looks like a Patreon bonus feed because I don't know what this show is. And then I'm like, oh, Power Pro Wrestling. This is the old, this is a UWF show.
Yeah, it's this. If my memory serves me correctly, it's the secondary show. They had the more traditional weekly TV show, which is again, that's evolved from Mid-South when UWF and Bill Watts tried to go national. They called it UWF. That was sort of your more standard garden variety studio TV show. We did an episode of that in season 2. If you want to get more details about what that was like, more of an idea of what that was like. Whereas this, and you'll get into it, I'm sure, but Power Pro Wrestling, it was a show where while they had a studio host, it was not matches taped in a studio. These were big matches or clipped matches from around the UWF loop, which was largely the Houston area and the New Orleans area.
That's right. Mid-South Pro Wrestling, which we covered in season 2, like you mentioned, in March of 1986. You mentioned it was an attempt to go national. It was an attempt to combat Vince McMahon's talent rating World Wrestling Federation. So promoter Bill Watts decided to try to take his Mid-South Wrestling territory national, and they renamed the territory Universal Wrestling Federation, because the universe is bigger than the world.
Which is then funny down the line because you think of the Universal Championship in the WWE and the WWE Universe as the fans. So yeah, we're a long ways away from that being something inflicted upon our ears. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before, particularly in season 2, and we had a lot of territory TV show episodes. But this was a time period where really your options were limited, or there were only bad options. Like you didn't have any great decisions to make. It was either continue to run as a more local or regional territory and just face the same fate all the others had and were going to face, which was death at the hands of the WWF, or attempt to go national. But the problem was that by the time companies, including Mid-South, made the decision to go national, it was already too late.
That's right. At this point in 1986, Watts thought highly enough of Terry Gordy to make him the first UWF heavyweight champion. He defeated Jim Duggan on May 30th, 1986 in Houston, and he signed him to a big money exclusive contract. But the move to independence meant a complete split from the NWA, which meant Bill Watts could no longer bring in champion Ric Flair for title defenses. The bills began to rack up, and Watts finally ended up having to sell the territory to the NWA's Jim Crockett Promotions in April of 1987 for about $4 million. What the NWA did during the unification process of the UWF and the NWA titles, the way they marginalized the top talent from the UWF, that's a story for another podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
So here, that all happened between March of 86 and April of 87. This show took place, the matches were taped in June of 86.
Some in May as well.
And some in May of 86. And this show aired June 21st, 1986. If you're looking for it on the Peacock streaming service, it is listed as July 21st, but it actually aired June 21st, 1986.
And if you're looking for it on the Peacock service, that means you're going to be frustrated for a while before you find it. But that's a story for another day as well.
Jim Ross welcomes us to Power Pro Wrestling. He's in a studio somewhere.
He's in a studio somewhere. And this immediately jogged my memories of watching Power Pro Wrestling as a kid and just loving this like wood paneled den that Jim Ross would be broadcasting from, anchoring this show with a sort of a bit of a video screen there, sort of digitally inserted. And I'm excited right away, not only because I have fond memories of Mid-South and the UWF as a child, but also because we're getting peak Jim Ross here. And I'm excited. We're going to get an hour of not only Jim Ross doing hosting, but man, he's got to be on commentary for the whole show, right?
You'd think so. I mean, you wouldn't waste Jim Ross's talents just doing some overdubs in the studio. We'll cut to the opening match. It's from the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. Brett Wayne Sawyer versus the one-man gang with General Skandar Akbar in his corner.
Yes, and one-man gang, he is... it's not quite Big Boss Man as far as the weight fluctuations. There will be times where he was tall and not in great shape, but not particularly round. This is not one of those times. He is huge here. I mean, he basically physically looks exactly like he did as Akeem, just wearing black instead of wearing purple.
Was it close enough that you did the Akeem dance while watching this match?
I may have. And that's one, by the way, if you have not heard that story about my my love as a child of doing the Akeem dance, you need to go back into the archives.
We're told the ring announcer is Bruce Pritchard. Yes, that Bruce Pritchard.
Yes. And not only are we are told that he is the ring announcer, our play-by-play guy for this match, who is not, in fact, Jim Ross, it is instead Joel Watts. He says that Bruce Pritchard is, quote, a great guy and a great ring announcer, which was some just interesting to hear editorializing about the quality of human of the ring announcer here. Not something you normally hear from a play-by-play guy. Visually, I can't shake how much this looks like ECW, just as far as the dim lighting, the type of film. I found that to be very interesting, and wonder, if obviously, as Paul Heyman was someone who studied Mid-South and took a lot of things from it, along as with Memphis and other places, if that was sort of one of his ideas as far as the look of the show. The other thing that
I did have to look up Joel Watts when he's told that that he is the commentator, and we see again in the credits that he was the executive producer of the show.
Yeah.
So I said, Joel Watts, like, who is this guy, and what's his relation to Bill Watts, the promoter and famous wrestler, of course. So Joel Watts was the son of Bill Watts and his first wife. And he was raised...
he's the not Eric Watts son of Bill Watts.
Correct. He was raised by Bill. And after Mid-South Sports sold to Jim Crockett Promotions in 1987, Joel Watts, he went to work in television production for Titan Sports, the WWF, which spelled the beginning of the end of his relationship with his father, Bill Watts. Joel ended up... leaving the wrestling business and quitting the WWF shortly after joining in 1987. So
the other thing about Joel is that it is eerie. He has the exact
Sounds
same,
exactly the same.
The exact same, very unique speaking cadence as Bill Watts. He tries to make a lot of the same points that Bill Watts would make, but his voice is just slightly higher. It's so strange. And then it's also just, you don't have that credibility of Bill Watts being an ass kicker and being in the company for so, being in the territory for so long. But it really threw me for a loop because, again, if you're familiar with Bill Watts on commentary, his cadence and his speaking style, for better or worse, is unlike anyone else. It's unmistakably Bill Watts. So to hear someone else with a similar sounding voice have the same just weird pauses and asides, it definitely was jarring.
Brett Wayne Sawyer keeps avoiding locking up with the gang. The one-man gang does a one-handed test of strength where Wayne is using two hands and the gang is using one.
And Gang wins. He bowls him into the corner.
Yep, and he just starts the beatdown from there.
This is where Joel Watts says that one-man gang is an example of the kind of athlete who is so naturally big and strong that he does not need to lift weights.
Press slam by the gang. Choking, and he just tosses Wayne outside. Lots of yelling when the gang is doing stuff.
Yes, imagine Killer Khan, but with a deep voice instead of a high pitched scream. And that's the one man gang here.
Yeah, who would have thought both ends of the spectrum would be annoying? And yes, they both are. Gang hits Wayne with a chair on the outside, and the bell rings. He got himself disqualified.
Yes, for using a chair. There's not a whole lot to this. Brett Wayne Sawyer is the epitome of a guy here.
Is the shoot brother, the real life brother of Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, yes, who we'll see in the next match.
And one guy got all the charisma, and one guy didn't. And I think you can probably figure which is which. But yeah, not a whole lot to this. It's a disqualification. One man gang just keeps doing moves. He hits a big clothesline, hits a huge splash. Carl Fergie, great referee from the Mid-South region, the Mid-South territory, tries to stop him but can't. And then they're going to commercial, and they call it PPW. And I'm just thinking, man, that does not roll off the tongue. Just say Power Pro Wrestling.
After commercial, we're still in the Superdome for the UWF TV title. The challenger, Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer, versus the UWF TV champion, Terry Taylor.
Yes, Terry Taylor. He's not
the Red Rooster.
He's not the computerized man of the 1990s, Terrence Taylor. He's not the tailor-made man. He's just high-fiving babyface TV champion Terry Taylor. This, Joel Watts tells us, is a rematch of when Terry Taylor defeated Buzz Sawyer to win the TV title. The one thing that I note in the ring introductions is that Vero Beach, Florida is one of those towns, one of those cities in America that I would not know that it exists if it wasn't for the fact that it's Terry Taylor's hometown. Like, as a kid, for whatever reason, that stuck out to me. Like, I always remembered Vero Beach, Florida. And then I remember like driving to Florida later on, I'd see Vero Beach. I'm like, that's the home of Terry Taylor. Like, you would never ever. It's like Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Like, who the hell would ever know what Robbinsdale, Minnesota is? But
except
you grew up hearing Rick Rude from Robbinsdale, Minnesota every week, and so you know the town.
Buzz Sawyer looks as gross as ever.
Yeah, and he's probably like 18 years old here, right?
Yeah, it's gross. And he's got furry boots on with no knee pads.
I'm surprised you can make that out. It is dark here in this building. My God.
If they didn't tell me it was the Superdome, it literally could have been just a warehouse. This could have been Trax West from Tough Enough with the lights out, right?
Empty warehouse with just them playing the soundtrack of a previously recorded wrestling match. There were no lights on. This was, I think the people that were at that in your house where they had the power outage and the pay-per-view
yes.
had to go off the air, they could see more of what happened.
Yeah.
Yes, they saw more of what happened at that show than the fans here in the Superdome could see, which I imagine meant probably not a huge house for this. I was amused by Joel Watts pointing out that to not be fooled by the furry boots, that they still hurt if you get kicked by them.
Sawyer's trying to get a handshake, but Taylor will have none of this. So Sawyer just kicks him in the balls anyway and starts the beatdown. Big forearms. Sawyer charges the corner and Taylor moves. Sawyer shoulder first into the ring post, and so Terry Taylor starts working over the arm of Buzz Sawyer.
This is where I note that they did a terrible job of miking up the ring for this show, that this was whatever the actual show that this match was recorded from. Like, they're taking bumps and you don't hear the sound of the mat at all. It's really, really weird.
No, a lot of these camera shots feel like the old ECW fan cam footage.
Yes.
It feels like handheld cameras at certain points.
The other weird thing about this too is that it then brought me back to, it's like the 12 or 13 disc Death Valley Driver message board best of Mid-South set that I have. And it's almost all matches with no commentary, like from the master tapes, but they're taken from shows like this, shows from Houston or shows from New Orleans, from Louisiana. And I remember it was sort of the same thing where it was multi-camera shoot, but this was not the production level of, say, world class.
No.
Around this time in the mid 80s.
Backbreaker by Sawyer, but Taylor keeps holding on to the arm lock. Sawyer shoves Taylor off into the ropes, leapfrogs, and a drop down by Buzz Sawyer, if you can believe it. Then this is crisscross, and Taylor hits a crossbody. This was so weird to see agilely moving around Buzz Sawyer here.
This was, I thought these two guys were auditioning to time travel into the future and challenge Starlight Kid for the high speed title in Stardom in 2021. This was nuts. This crazy sequence of drop downs, like you said, leapfrogs, crisscrosses until Terry Taylor catches him with a crossbody and another arm drag. Just absolute breakneck pace, perfectly executed. Have to go back and mention, though, Joel Watts says that Buzz Sawyer is on a strict diet.
Disagree.
And I'm like, why are we talking about Buzz Sawyer in that way? He's the Mad Dog. He's crazy.
After commercial, Taylor tries another crossbody, but Sawyer drops down to avoid it. And to the outside, Taylor slammed on the floor. Sawyer suplexes Taylor from the apron back into the ring, gets a 2 count, and then we get a bear hug by Sawyer. It's well applied. Gorilla Monsoon approved here.
Yeah, I wrote great execution, perfect execution from Buzz Sawyer, great selling from Terry Taylor. This is a 5-star, an absolute 5-star bear hug, gets the Gorilla Monsoon stamp of approval, even though he wasn't in this territory. This is followed up by, as Joel Watts calls it, channeling Gordon Soley, a huge back suplex.
Yes, we get a suplex reference, and then back to the bear hug again. Taylor uses a hip toss to get out of the bear hug, but Sawyer puts it right back on again.
Joel Watts says the crowd is chanting, "Go, Terry, go." I do not hear this. It's weird. Joel Watts, he's so odd because I like the idea of a solo play-by-play guy being super analytical. And he's trying to impart legitimately good information, but he's so terrible at delivering it. It's really weird.
So in this bear hug, my doorbell rang, and I forgot to pause the match. I got up, I answered the door, I came back, and this bear hug was still on. I did not miss anything. I did not have to rewind a single minute.
That's some fan service right there, traveling through time.
Taylor fights free with punches. He goes for a leapfrog, but Sawyer catches him and hits a power slam for a great near fall here.
The best power slam I have ever seen in my life.
It was solid.
This is Rick Steiner would go on to take this years later and do this power slam out of midair from a leapfrog. And I believe Kensuke Sasaki did this in their match in the New Japan WCW Super Show, the same spot as well. Just a beautiful execution on this power slam. I should also note, by the way, when we're talking Sasaki, one of my least favorite match results ever. One of the match results that made me the most angry when watching it was in late 1995 when the one-man gang defeated Kensuke Sasaki for the WCW United States title.
Ooh.
So we got a lot of Sasaki references somehow from an 86 UWF Mid-South show.
If you asked me, was the one-man gang ever a United States champion, I don't know if I would have answered that question correctly, because it's a blind spot for me.
So this is the progression of the United States Championship as 1995 turned into 1996. Kensuke Sasaki beat Sting. He lost the title to the one-man gang. The one-man gang then lost the title to Conan.
I bet that match was awesome.
Oh, it was about as good as the Sasaki match.
So back to Buzz Sawyer. He's bleeding from one of Taylor's punches, and Sawyer goes off the top rope, misses a splash. Taylor with a sunset flip gets the pin, still the TV champion, Terry Taylor. Sawyer grabs a microphone, calls this win a fluke.
Yeah, he calls Terry Taylor
you held the
Closet
tights.
Champion.
Yeah, you held the tights, and so Taylor runs back in. Sawyer catches him coming back into the ring, beats up Taylor. Taylor's able to fight back with punches and a Thez press. The ref, for no reason, counts 3 again.
Yes.
and then we go back to the studio where Jim Ross is there to let us know that Terry Taylor is a top contender for Terry Bam Bam Gordy's UWF heavyweight title.
Yeah, I don't know if this is writing Buzz Sawyer out of the territory, out of the company, but it sure felt like it.
We're back to the Superdome again, and thank God Jim Ross is on commentary now.
Yes, they've gotten the hook out for Joel Watts. It's the last we'll see or hear of him, and now we have Jim Ross on commentary, and the match is Coco Ware and pre-Secret Service edition Jack Victory.
Jack Victory with Lady Maxine accompanying him. Now, this is Coco Ware, who would go on to be the future Coco Beware. This is no Parrot, no Frankie here with this version.
He is
Coco
the Birdman, though, as Jim Ross calls him throughout the match. I also noted that in this match here in 1986, Jack Victory, who would get rather large through the years, is somehow skinnier than Steve Corino was when Jack Victory managed Steve Corino, which is an accomplishment.
Yeah, my favorite Coco Ware is the one that we saw in Florida Championship Wrestling with Percy Pringle.
Absolutely.
But here we get some quick action, a great drop kick by Coco, knocks Victory outside. After collecting himself, getting back in the ring, Victory goes to work.
As he goes to work, Jim Ross tells us that Jack Victory is a former Pro Wrestling Illustrated Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, he then tells us...
imagine in like the 80s and all the wrestlers that debuted, whatever year it was, just imagine how abnormally weak that year must have been that Jack Victory was the Rookie of the Year.
Well, that's like that weird 1990 Tommy Dreamer was the Rookie of the Year.
Yes, yes.
Coco Ware, we're told in 1986, has the edge in experience over Jack Victory.
Yes. The idea of like anyone ever having the edge in experience over Jack Victory just seems...
It's so weird.
Preposterous, because he's one of those guys that was born 45 years old.
Right hands and clotheslines from Coco in the corner. Coco tries a splash, but Victory moves, and Coco hits the top turnbuckle. Victory's in control again. An elbow drop off the second rope, and JR tells us that coming off the top rope is a disqualification in the UWF. So second rope is okay.
Yes, and I immediately then flash back to 6 years later as an 11-year-old being so angry that Bill Watts was keeping me from being able to see Jushin Liger jump off the top rope. But here again, Bill Watts company, so you can only come off the second rope. He may have, in fact, saved Jack Victory's life with that rule because this second rope elbow drop was as awkward as it gets. We've talked before about a Stevie Ray first rope leg drop that is going down in the annals of Wrestling at Random history, or that football player whose name I can never
Russ
remember.
Francis?
Yeah, Russ Francis top rope splash. This was the second rope elbow drop of Russ Francis top rope splashes.
The crowd starts cheering for something. And then out of the darkness emerges Dark Journey, and she's at ringside. Victory tries a suplex. Coco Ware slides behind him and rolls him up and gets the pin.
So to recap, in the last 2 matches, we've had 3 roll-up finishes.
That is correct. After the match, Victory tries to attack him, but Coco backdrops Victory over the top rope to the floor. Then Dark Journey takes down Maxine. Victory pulls Dark Journey off Maxine, holding her for Maxine to get in some shots. Coco makes the save. Dark Journey throws powder in Maxine's face, kicks her, jumps on top until they're finally separated.
She sells this. Lady Maxine sells this powder to the face as if she's a robot who has not had enough oil and grease in her joints. It is just, you haven't seen anything like it before. The most noteworthy thing about this is that Jim Ross has never enjoyed anything in his life more than he enjoyed this angle at the end of this match. He is screaming. You could hear him smiling. I don't know why he loved this so much, but he absolutely adored every moment of this.
Back in the studio, the same Jim Ross recaps what we just saw.
Yes.
Dark Journey doesn't have to worry about Jack Victor anymore because she has the missing link now. So
the missing link, who we've talked about before on this podcast, one of my favorites from the world class days. And then, as guys did back in this time period, they go from territory to territory. The missing link was coming into Mid-South, to the UWF, I should say.
After commercial,
One fall, 45-minute time limit, and an excitement galore here in the Coliseum. And keep in mind, this Friday night, these 4...
May 9th, 1986, Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas. Dr. Death Steve Williams and Ted DiBiase, yes, the future $1 million man, Ted DiBiase, super baby faces here, taking on Sting and the future Ultimate Warrior, the Blade Runners.
This is a time capsule of a match in many ways. First off, you have, as you mentioned, the Dr. Death Steve Williams and Ted DiBiase in matching red tights as baby faces. And man, seeing Ted DiBiase in this role, we'll get into this throughout this match. But Ted DiBiase, Dr. Death Steve Williams, who would go on to each be a part of very effective and famed and acclaimed tag teams in Japan, with Dr. Death Steve Williams, obviously, and Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and one of the best tag teams ever. And we've talked about before on this podcast, Ted DiBiase going cowboy cosplay, teaming with Stan the Lariat Hansen and Pete. Who was that guy that they remember they teamed with, the 6-man team?
Pete Roberts?
Roberts, yes, the more diminutive cowboy of that trio. No Pete Roberts to be seen here. It is, however, Jim Ross and some other guy named Pete on the call. At first I thought maybe it's gonna be Paul Bosch, but it's not Paul Bosch on the call. It's Jim Ross and some guy named Pete. But as you said, they're taking on the Blade Runners, who are in fact a very young Sting, and then the future Ultimate Warrior, he was not being called the Dingo Warrior here. He was they called him
Blade Runner Rock.
Also, fun fact, I don't remember if we talked about this before when we talked about Big Van Vader, but this guy, Jim Hellwig, Rock, who would go on to be the Ultimate Warrior, he was the first choice to be the Vader character. He turned it down, and that's when they went with Leon White, the guy who we all went on to know as Big Van Vader, or if you're a WWF fan, the man they call Vader.
Yeah, Sting looks exactly like Sting here.
He does. The way I wrote this down is that Sting looks like if Ricky Morton was on steroids here.
Well, Sting is very bodybuilder Sting at this point. He's a big dude, but he's got the blonde hair and the spiky blonde hair, and it looks like Sting.
He looks like Sting. Meanwhile, Rock, the future Ultimate Warrior, just looks like the unnamed third member of the Powers of Pain here.
He's got short hair. So I had to look it up because I'm like, all right, well, what happened here with Blade Runner Rock, the Blade Runner team in 1986 here? What happened to them in Mid-South? So I looked it up. Dave Meltzer reports that Blade Runner Rock, with short hair, he was as big and as muscular as anyone in pro wrestling, but there were no signs of any appeal whatsoever. In Mid-South, the Blade Runners were not well thought of, particularly when Bill Watts fired Kelly Kiniski.
Kelly Kiniski, wow.
Yeah,
going back to our World Class episode from season 2.
Exactly, yes, the same Kelly Kiniski. He was wrestling as Masked Superstar number 2, and to make room for them, Kiniski, the son of famous wrestler Gene Kiniski, he was a nice guy, quiet, caused no problems,
perfectly competent in the ring. Like he was
very good. Yes,
yeah, he wasn't remarkable, but he was a guy that could hold his own from that match that we watched.
He had no charisma at all, though.
No, none whatsoever.
And they fired him to make room for these Blade Runners, and the locker room leaders were not happy with this decision. Blade Runner Rock did not fit in well, nor did the Blade Runners connect with fans yet. He had issues in Mid-South, being green to the business. Watts, who was 47 at the time, came out of retirement and worked some as a babyface against them, and they were told by other wrestlers that when the boss hits you, you have to go flying.
Yes.
And the future Ultimate Warrior couldn't comprehend why an old guy who was somewhat fat, although even taller than he was booked to beat him like that. The reality,
I would say Bill Watts was big boned, is
yes,
how they would call it.
The reality is Watts was already an area legend at the time, and so there were other issues. He and Sting didn't get along well at the time. The feeling was in Mid-South that Sting had a great attitude and that Rock didn't. And he had already garnered a bad reputation after a short time in the business, and he quit. It was very possible that his career was actually going to be over, but he was able to find a job in Texas for world-class wrestling as the Dingo Warrior, a character that was come up with by Gary Hart in world-class wrestling. So
we have Gary Hart to blame for inflicting the Ultimate Warrior on us. I found the one thing I can complain about with Gary Hart. Thanks.
So that is the short-term run of the Ultimate Warrior here in Mid-South Wrestling. So
yeah, and we'll have some thoughts. I will, at least, on Sting and Blade Runner Rock and their presentation on the show and in this match. And yeah, it is something. But no, Sting he's super green here, but you can see there's something there. He's wearing a crop top, and again, it looks like he's wearing Ricky Morton's pants. But you can still tell he's Sting. And this starts off with something that's actually very cool. One of those matchups that I think a lot of people would think never happened. We get to open this contest, Sting and Ted Dibiase going at it, with Sting as the heel and Ted Dibiase as the beloved babyface, just like you all thought.
Yeah, Sting keeps pushing Dibiase off after lockups. He's posing and flexing. A headlock by Dibiase, and Sting throws him off. Dibiase then with a series of drop kicks, the fiery babyface Ted Dibiase.
Yeah, really well executed drop kicks, a hip toss that the non-Jim Ross guy on commentary calls a hip flip, which is, I've never heard that one before.
Frustrated heel Sting has to bail to the outside.
Yes, to get tutelage from Eddie Gilbert. Again,
Hot
this
stuff. Eddie Gilbert
if
managing.
you did not watch this at the time, this would be as bizarro world as it gets. A few notes. The commentary is talking about coming up the next Friday. There's going to be a big tournament. I think it's, did they say that I think it's Sting versus Kamala, Ted DiBiase versus Blade Runner Rock. And then at this point, Jim Ross just openly says a lot of people are comparing the Blade Runners to the Road Warriors.
Yeah, they are not the Road Warriors. They are not.
They are tall, jacked up white men in face paint. That is about where the comparisons begin and end. We haven't done too much of a fashion corner outside of talking about Sting here, but Eddie Gilbert is looking as Eddie Gilbert as he has ever looked. He's out on the floor. He's got his like puffy 80s jacket. He's got his like fiery flames sunglasses that he's wearing indoors. Just a
I feel
Eddie
like
Gilbert,
if you got the dictionary out and someone you were thumbing through to find or an encyclopedia or so, you're googling Google image search for 1980s fashion.
Yes,
like Eddie Gilbert in this match should be what pops up.
Yes, or 80s pro wrestler. To me, there's an equally likely chance if you had Googled that it would either pull a picture of Eddie Gilbert or a picture of mid-80s Michael Hayes.
Sure, yes, exactly. Back inside, we get Sting just working a long headlock.
With this referee being so close. Like, you have not seen, like, if you watch MMA, referees do not get this close to check if a guy is going unconscious from a rear naked choke. He is in there looking at this side headlock from Sting. Then DiBiase tries to run Sting off the ropes and break the headlock several times. Sting aggressively holds on, and I really liked this. This was different from when like Flair and Steamboat would do this spot, and it would look really smooth. Like, it looked ragged, and it looked like DiBiase was really getting wrenched around, but that's how it should look. This actually came off really well.
Yeah, Sting is the power guy here, and so he's doing this headlock like a power guy who's new to the business would do one. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it actually made it look more real than if he was a guy who knew how to work.
DiBiase finally gets free, and then he drop kicks both the Blade Runners. DiBiase,
that's what we expected. More drop kicks from Ted DiBiase. These are now 4 drop kicks that he's thrown in like the first 3 minutes of this match. Ted DiBiase just a couple of years short of him being the $1 Million Man.
DiBiase and Dr. Death then do leaping double high fives as we head to commercial.
Yes. So now we've got Sting looking like Ricky Morton and Dr. Death Steve Williams and Ted DiBiase acting like the Rock and Roll Express. This is something.
After the commercial, Dr. Death is down in the ring and Sting is going to work. He hits that high.
Have you noticed, by the way, we're through one commercial break and out the other side. And the only guy we've seen in the ring here on this TV match, which does include edits, the only guy we've seen in the ring legally from the Blade Runners is Sting.
Yeah, I'm sure that's by design.
Oh, yeah. I noted that right away. I said, we have not seen a moment of Rock, of Blade Runner Rock in, meanwhile, though, Sting hits an awesome jumping elbow drop and a great fist drop, which I wasn't expecting. If there's a match with Ted DiBiase, I'm expecting the first fist drop to come from him.
Right. This jumping elbow is something you'd see Sting do throughout his career, and he looked good doing it here. Dr. Death, then he shoots Sting into the ropes. They collide, and both men go down.
They do. This is the moment, though, on commentary where Jim Ross confirms that Blade Runner Rock has been in the match.
Yes.
But we, watching this edited version of the match on TV, have not seen him. So to your point about how not well regarded he was, to put it lightly, they basically edited every moment of him in this match legally. They edited that out.
Sting's up first, and he slaps on a chin lock. Dr. Death fights out. He throws Sting into the corner and misses the charge into the corner. And now, for the first time, Rock is in.
Is he ever? He hits a body slam. He misses a terrible elbow drop. And then that's pretty much the last we see of him in this match.
Yeah, Dr. Death makes the tag to Dibiase. Sting tags in too.
Yes.
And so Rock is out again.
This
and Dibiase runs wild.
Who was the football player in TNA that won the tag titles and never got off the apron?
Pac-Man Jones.
Yeah, this was Pac-Man Jones was more active in that TNA tag title match than at least what we were presented with of Blade Runner Rock here. And I believe as a wrestler, it was allowed in Blade Runner Rock's contract to wrestle. Whereas Pac-Man Jones had it explicitly in his contract that he could not get in the ring and wrestle.
All 4 men are in the ring. The finish comes when Dibiase picks up Sting for a slam.
No, hold on. Before that, we've got to talk about this terrifyingly low backdrop that Ted DiBiase hits on Sting. I thought Sting was going to die.
I did have a note here that
oh my god,
that backdrop.
I've never seen anything like that, and the fact that was from Ted DiBiase, and obviously Sting was green, but still, like, if you're going to tell me who would be involved in a poorly executed near-death experience of a back body drop and it wasn't Blade Runner Rock, I would not have believed you. Although if that had happened, they probably would have edited it off.
DiBiase picks up Sting for a slam. He's holding him, and Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert comes into the ring. He drop kicks the back of Sting, so he lands on top of DiBiase. But DiBiase rolls through, and awesome. He's on top, and he gets the 3 count.
Hot Stuff Gilbert now. Drop kicks, but DiBiase run him over. We got 3, and we got Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase.
The Blade Runners, no doubt about, are big, strong individuals. But I don't think they've got what it takes inside. And I'm speaking of intestinal fortitude. They didn't stand up to the test of Steve Dr. Death Williams and Ted DiBiase. I don't know how much longer they're going to last in this area. Perhaps they'll find an area that the competition is not quite as tough.
He does. The fans go crazy when Ted DiBiase, the babyface, pins heel Sting. And then for some reason, the fans are all waving American flags because they conquered, I guess, was this like a USA versus parts unknown nationalistic battle? I don't know. This is weird, but the very patriotic fans here in the arena. We then go back to this wood paneling den of a studio of Power Pro Wrestling, and Jim Ross just flat out says that the Blade Runners aren't tough enough to succeed in the UWF, and they may have to find a territory with weaker competition if they want to stay in the business. This was like we talk about on a lot of the WWE, WWF shows that we review, where like certain announcers are just avatars for Vince McMahon. This was the mind, spirit, and soul of Bill Watts inhabiting the body of Jim Ross saying this. Like if you've watched a lot of Mid-South when Bill Watts was on commentary, this is what he would always do when guys would go elsewhere, guys would go to WWF or elsewhere and like win a championship. They would talk about the guy like having been beaten by Al Perez in Mid-South or something. They'd show the videos of like, you know, Hacksaw Jim Duggan losing to Brett Wayne Sawyer or something. And that's verbally what this was. I have never, and again, just with the backdrop of how you described particularly Blade Runner Rock and how he was thought of in the company, I was shocked, and then I howled with laughter as I wrote in all caps the notes that I just read.
Well, yeah, because JR in the studio buries the Blade Runners, and then he basically just says, go find a job somewhere else. Yes. And so that's when I had to go look up what the heck happened to the Blade Runners in Mid-South. That's why I did that bit of research, because I'm like, it was just so weird to just hear JR bury them 6 feet under like that.
It was something. I felt bad for Sting too, because I felt like Sting was the baby that got thrown out with the Blade Runner Rock bathwater. It was not fair to him. He looked really good in this match considering how green he was, and then you factor in a similar experience level Jim Hellwig just looking like he, from the nanoseconds that we saw him, were not impressive.
After commercial, JR runs down future dates.
Which, yeah, they've got a loop which it doesn't sound like they're not tethered to one state, but they sure don't sound national or sure as hell not universal. As the loop is as follows: Memphis, Dallas, Wichita, Kansas City, Tulsa, and Little Rock, Arkansas. So they have an area, they have a region, but
dare you say a territory?
Yeah, exactly. That's still what this felt like, just with different call letters, which is totally fine. And then Jim Ross, after thanking all of us for allowing the UWF into our collective living rooms, tells us that his rundown of next week's show it's the most generic thing possible. He basically tells us we'll have the exact same show as this week, but with a few different guys. He says we'll have matches from Houston and from the Superdome. You'll see some stars. We'll have some interviews that I think you will find interesting. And then that's it. He clearly had no idea what was going to be on next week's show and bluffed his way through this close. And that's where they left it.
So looking at this show, this is obviously the B show, but the B show had competitive matches, which again, in 1986, most A shows didn't have competitive matches.
It's so funny because it is the B show, but from anybody, if you watched Mid-South Weekly TV, the regular show, and then you watched this, anybody through Modern Eyes would look at this as the A show because it had top stars in competitive matches against each other, championship matches. They were in big arenas, whereas the A show was all squash matches usually in a TV studio filled with as many promos as wrestling matches. I don't think there was a single promo on this show other than Jim Ross cutting a promo on the Blade Runners. So it was a very different format. I enjoyed it for what it was. This brought back a lot of memories for me of just, again, Mid-South and the UWF in a completely different way from the Mid-South proper TV show that we watched before. But no, this was super fun. As far as best or worst things on this show, Joel Watts is pretty far down the list. I did not find him to be particularly engaging. And again, also knowing that you had Jim Ross there and instead this other guy was speaking, just did not feel right. I'm trying to think of other favorite things sort of off the beaten path on this show. Obviously the burial, but I think maybe my favorite thing on this show, because it was so bad, but Jim Ross's reaction to Lady Maxine and Dark Journey going at it is one for the ages, because he's calling this horrendous angle like it's Stone Cold beating the hell out of Vince McMahon at the height of the Attitude Era on Raw. It's something to see.
No, that is a good one. I would say for me, my favorite thing on this show was babyface Ted DiBiase.
Yes, that's undoubtedly the best thing on this show.
It's by far
rocking and rolling, high fiving, hot tagging, babyface fired Ted DiBiase. 100%.
I felt robbed. I didn't get enough fiery babyface Dr. Death here. I did get the leaping double high five, but we didn't get enough of babyface Dr. Death.
Some of that might have been washed out in the
stupid
the Blade Runner Rock edits.
I always love when teams have matching gear, and we had DiBiase and Dr. Death matching in the red, and we had the Blade Runners matching in their wacky outfits. So this was all good.
Buzz Sawyer was awesome in the limited time we saw him on here.
He did some moves. He's still just gross for me to watch.
Buzz Sawyer, to me, he on a TV show, you can't feature him without having him grab the mic and scream.
Sure.
Because that's at least 50% of what makes the Buzz Sawyer act so great. Part of it is that he looks gross, but he's freakishly athletic. And then the other thing is just the like double cocaine promos. Those are all part of it too. We didn't get any of that here.
No, and I don't think there was anything really bad. I mean, just the Dark Journey Maxine stuff was pretty horrendous, but Jim Ross
made it,
saves the day. So I couldn't imagine if we saw that with Joel Watts on the call.
God, no, that would have been Or if Bill Mercer, I wonder if he would have called one of them Bobby Gentry.
So with that, we're going to wrap it up. I do want to remind everyone that Twitter or Instagram are the best ways to interact with the show at Wrestle at Random. You can also reach out to the show via Facebook, facebook.com/wrestling at random. Or if you stay off of social media, good for you. Can't blame you. You can also send us emails, wrestlingatrandom@gmail.com. And the entire back catalog of this podcast is available. All the links I just described, they're all at the website, wrestlingatrandom.com.
And if you are a new listener, I just want to jump in, Jeremy, because if you're a new listener here in early in season 3, if you're listening in linear fashion, you have 2 full seasons of this podcast that you can go back and listen to for free. Upwards of 70 episodes that you have never heard if you're a brand new listener.
Are you sure? Available. Are you sure they weren't subscribed? Can they go back and listen? I mean, they missed when the episode came out. Does it make sense to go back and listen?
Absolutely. This is evergreen content. I appreciate you teeing that up for me, Jeremy. You can go back and listen for free. When you listen, it's new to you. These are shows that you've never heard before. You could do several cross-country trips to and back with the amount of audio that we have for you now for free, not to mention what you're about to tell the people about, Jeremy, the additional way they can support the show and get even more audio from us.
That's right. If you love what we do, you want to support us, and you want something in return, you can have bonus content. You can have additional shows. We put out a show every week on the free feed, and we put out an additional show every week on the bonus feed. You can access it via our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. You can sign up there, get hours and hours of bonus content.
Dozens of shows. We have well in excess of 30 shows by now up on that bonus feed. It's odds and ends. It's the only things that don't fall into the purview of being weekly TV shows or pay-per-views. A lot of those odds and ends are there. Or, and I'm sure you're going to tell the fine people this, Jeremy, how they can be the randomizer. We've got several episodes on the bonus content where people who have chosen to subscribe at that higher tier have been able to pick a show for us to review. We watch it, we review it, we pay off your executive producer role.
That's right. You can be the randomizer. You pick that. You pick that tier on Patreon. You send us a message, say, "I want you to watch this show," and then we say, "Sure, sounds awesome," and we watch it and we review it, and it goes on to that Patreon feed. And you can always bump yourself back down to the lower tier where you continue to get audio content going forward. You can also bump yourself up to the tier to get yourself a T-shirt. This is a great T-shirt. It's our logo. You can see it at the Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. Get yourself a shirt, then bump down to the bonus audio tier, or bump down to the Be the Randomizer tier. Send us a thing. Tell us what you want to watch. All of that additional content is available at patreon.com/wrestling at random. It's also available if you're an Apple Podcast subscriber. You can click the little subscribe button in your Apple Podcast feed, and for the same monthly charge, you get all your bonus content, but you get it in your Apple Podcast feed. So that's all there.
And we should definitely want to give a shout out to those Apple Podcast subscribers, because in addition to our Patreon supporters, we do have Apple Podcast subscribers as well. And that is a great, quick and easy way for you to get the bonus content if you don't want to mess around with everything on Patreon.
Yeah, if you don't want to create a Patreon account, this is one button push in your Apple Podcast. So real easy. You can start listening to the bonus content today, right?
And you'll get every bonus show immediately. If you subscribe today, you don't just get the upcoming episode, the next episode on the bonus feed. You get all those dozens of episodes I mentioned earlier from the paid feed. You get access to all of them right away.
It becomes everything. The back catalog is unlocked for you. And like you mentioned, it's evergreen content. If you haven't heard it, it's new for you. It's like we just did a huge episode dump, and it's all for you. So I'm jealous of the new subscribers. They get all this new audio content. So make sure you do that. I can't tell you how many times I think I text you, Adam, that I'm going on a long car ride. I've got my commute to the office now. I'm going on a plane, and I say, man, I wish I had episodes of our show to listen to while I was traveling. I wish I could be a listener of this podcast. So.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot, that if we weren't doing this podcast, this would be our favorite podcast, to listen to, which I guess is why we decided to start it in the first place.
And we can continue to do it because of your support. So thank you to all the patrons that continue to do that. And with that, we're going to wrap it up this week. Adam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. This TV show week for the podcast brought another blast from the past, some nostalgic memories from my youth. It also brought Joel Watts, but hey, the randomizer giveth when it gives us Jim Ross, and it taketh away when it gives us the like of Joel Watts.
I want to thank everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time.